Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish with COS Today, along with my co-host Ken Kashiba. Kashuba. I don't know, Ken. Once in a while, I mispronounce your name. I'm sorry about that.
You regress back to those old, early days. Yeah,
Evidently. Well, listen, Ken, we got a lot to cover tonight, so let's just jump right into it, okay?
I'm ready.
Um, Sovereign Wealth Fund. Do you know much about that?
Until it came up as a topic, I did not know much about it all, and I'm eager to learn some more.
Well, let's Gary Harbaugh. Gary does, as you know, the Debt Avalanche series for us,
Yep.
and Gary put together some thoughts. So let's get right into it, and let's both learn something about the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Gary with Convention of States, and recently President Donald Trump signed an executive order asking his Treasury Secretary and I believe Commerce Department Secretary to develop a plan for a sovereign wealth fund. And so the idea behind this is to get better stewardship of our nation's resources, potentially lower taxes, enhance our economic security, and maybe create a idea of preserving wealth rather than just consuming wealth. So let's talk a little bit about this. First of all, what is a sovereign wealth fund? It is a private investment fund that is owned by a sovereign government. And so this would be owned by the United States government. A number of nations have sovereign wealth funds, and most of them are funded with revenues from the extraction of natural resources on government owned land. And so that's what they are. They then invest that money privately into business enterprises. Um, the upside of this is, it has some good ideas behind it, but there's some really big, I think, downsides. I don't particularly like the idea for the reason of all the downsides. Fundamentally, when private enterprise makes an investment, they look at the probable or possible return on the investment, and they're looking at the economics of the investment. Is this good or bad based on the economic realities as they assess them? On the other hand, anytime the government makes an investment decision, there are always political considerations involved. And I know that the sovereign wealth funds, they can start out saying, "Oh, well, this is going to be, independently managed. It'll be private, so on." But there are all kinds of conflicts of interest that are just inevitable. So, for example, let's say a sovereign wealth fund invests in a pharmaceutical company developing a new anti-cancer drug. Man, that's great. What happens when the sovereign wealth fund owned company goes before the, in my opinion, already corrupt FDA for approval of that drug? You can't really have an independent decision made when one entity, the FDA, is owned by or controlled by the federal government, and the company that's applying for approval of a drug is owned by the federal government, either in whole or in part. And so that's just one example of a huge potential conflict of interest. Another conflict of interest is that when government owns companies or owns businesses or owns enterprises of any kind, they seem to like to have them unionized. Think of the airport security, the transportation security. The whole idea behind this, the Democrats kind of went along with it, said, hey, we want these to be federal employees because they will all be unionized. So you can't really have companies that are privately owned or that are owned by a sovereign wealth fund that are on a level playing field with non government owned enterprises. So it's a bad idea for that reason. The oldest sovereign wealth fund in the world was created by the country of Kuwait. And was created in 1953. Now, let's compare Kuwait with the United States. First of all, Kuwait is a constitutional monarchy. It's a monarchy. The top three government officials all have the same last name. So it's not really a republic like the United States, a constitutional republic. And so Kuwait also is a very small country. Kuwait inevitably has to invest outside of Kuwait. I mean, they couldn't invest all the money they have in Kuwait. That's just not that much to invest in. But if you have the United States owning a sovereign wealth fund, where are they going to invest? Well, they're going to have to invest considerable amounts of that money right here in the United States. So suddenly you have this huge conflict of interest. You have the government potentially regulating the same companies that it owns a big stake in. That's just a bad idea. And, for this and other reasons, I think that a sovereign wealth fund is not a good idea. I think that the government should stick to its constitutional responsibilities as outlined in our Constitution, the purposes of government. And it's not a purpose of government to own private entities like that. I think it's better to maintain a separation between government and business. I think business and wealth is better privately owned. And you can argue about, the ups and downs of that. But I think we're much better off keeping business and government separate. And anyway, as far as a sovereign wealth fund is concerned, that's the way I see it. Not a good idea.
Dale, I agree with Gary. I think, to me, this sounds a lot like picking and choosing. If you go back to the Obama years when he selected certain companies, and what happened to what was it? It was a solar company that
Right.
I forget the name of the company, but went out, went bankrupt, went out of business. I think Gary's right. This does not sound like anything our government was ever meant to do. It's let's stick to the Constitution.
Yeah, I'm not high on this idea either. But my reasoning is, hey, if we're generating any revenues from resources and so forth, it ought to all be going to pay the debt down. That should be the main objective right now, it seems to me.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Along those lines, you've also probably heard about the savings that the Doge group would generate, and you've probably heard talk about giving taxpayers a refund. Have you heard about this $5,000 refund?
I have. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, I jumped on my soapbox on this one. Let me get on the soapbox here just briefly, Ken. Then we'll be right back. Okay.
Yep.
Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, COS Today host. I just wanted to jump on my soapbox real quickly here, and I want to just go on the record with regard to this $5,000 tax refund that you've probably heard mentioned in the news. I know Elon Musk has mentioned this as well as the president. And I just want to go on the record as being opposed to this, any kind of a tax refund of that nature. Right now, our debt in this country is at about 37 trillion dollars. Our debt to GDP ratio is something in the neighborhood of 120%. That has not been that high since the end of World War II. According to my research, a very healthy nation, well-established nation, should not have a debt to GDP ratio of more than 60%. Well, even at 60%, that would put our debt at 21 trillion. And I personally, I think that's even too high. So I'm going to go on the record here as being opposed to any kind of a refund of any nature. believe me, folks, if we work at reducing the debt in the long run, this is going to benefit all of us in the way of prices and interest rates and lower taxes, and especially for our grandchildren and their children. So that's the money. It's their money that we have spent and to accumulate this debt. So I really think all savings generated from fraud and waste gets discovered should go toward reducing the debt. So I just wanted to get on my soapbox and go on the record with that opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dale. I think I had some mixed feelings about it. I think certainly it would help people right now who are struggling, who could use the kick in the butt.
No doubt about that. I could use $5,000. There's no doubt about that.
I think the long run is what you're talking about, and I think that's something that with interest rates down and prices and everything, people will eventually be able to right the ship a little bit there too. I think one other example I think of as we're talking about this government, the government getting involved with investing and what have you. I personally have seen a number of studies that have looked at Social Security, and great idea, but the government has abused that section too. And I've seen studies where if you were to take that money over the years that the government extracted from your paycheck and it was automatically invested, you'd be sitting on a nest egg of probably $500,000 or so, rather than sitting back, collecting $2,000 to $3,000 every month. And if you survive long enough to be able to spend it or use it.
Yeah.
So the government just gets involved in money, and we've all, here we are.
Yep, you're right. Well, I wanted to get on the record. I haven't heard any more about that. But it'll come up again, I'm sure. Oh, yeah. So I just wanted to get on the record. And we got a thing. Dave's Daily Dose is going to give us an opinion on it too. But before we get to him, how about you telling us about the QR code up there?
Sure, that QR code right up there.
Yeah.
is our support QR code. So basically, if you are enjoying the COS Today programming and all of our contributors and people that come on this show, it's a way of basically supporting us by taking your smartphone out, capturing that QR code, putting your name and an email address, and you'll be added to a free platform where we have a lot of our assorted contributors, their complete series, links to different websites that are very educational and informative. So free. We don't look for donations. We don't ask for money. We just look for your support.
All right. Good deal. Well, like I said, our contributor, David Punt out of Minnesota, does Dave's Daily Dose for us. He's got an opinion on this $5,000 tax refund. So let's listen to what he has to say.
Sounds good.
Do I want the money? Do I not want the money? And I can't ask my wife because she's not here right now. I think I know what she would say. No, I guess I don't. This is Dave's Daily Dose on Brooklyn Road Radio. I'm David Allen Punt. Mr. Trump suggested to Mr. Musk that we earmark some of that cash he's digging up, cash we've already paid in, cash that all sorts of people have scammed out of the system in their special way and squirreled away, cash that's either not recoverable or will take a very muscular Department of Justice to claw back and give it to us. Does that have a nice ring to it? Sure. I'd like the money. So I should just say I'll take the money and get on with it, right? $5,000. There's an old joke about the guy who says, how much would you have if someone gave you 5 female pigs and 5 male deer? Let's see, let me repeat that. 5 female pigs and 5 male deer. Well, female pigs are sows for you city kids, And for you non-hunters, a male deer is called a buck. So $5,000. $5,000. Want me to say it again? Oh, you get it? Okay. $5,000. Granted, it wouldn't be in the bank account very long, probably a day or so, maybe not even that long. There's this Visa bill and this MasterCard bill and that Spectrum bill, and then there's the roof that needs replacing. Is it possible to get $5,000 for each of us? Maybe that's asking a little bit too much. If I don't take the money, who gets it? If the answer is some transgender comic book won't get published and a group of guys and gals in Cambodia won't get DEI training, that makes it too easy. But if it's a group of veterans who don't have a place to sleep, that makes it a little tougher. I guess I have to have more information. If I don't take the money but Stacey Abrams keeps her $20 billion or whatever she got for her global warming effort, that's easy. Give it to me. But I have to know that Stacey was really going to get the money, and the veterans, and the poor people of Malawi. It's not enough to know who would really get the money, and it's not enough to rely on my greedy but empty pocketbook. Oh, the missus just came back in. Let's ask her. Dear, do we want the money? Her answer? Of course, why not? We got a roof to fix. Okay, I guess it's settled. I'm David Allen Punt.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
For this, but I guess we got to leave the wives out of the equation.
I thought that was Dave had a good point there.
But I like his sows and bucks too.
Yeah. But he had a good point, as to if he doesn't take it, where's the money going to go? Is it going to go to something worthwhile or?
Yeah.
Of course, my point is it goes to pay the debt down. So anyway.
And you can tell by Dave's analysis there that he's straight out of Wisconsin too.
Minnesota.
Okay. Well,
yeah, Minnesota. All right. Well, Dave's we really appreciate Dave's contributions. They're very good. Very good. Well, again, a couple weeks ago, matter of fact, it was February 19th. We had our Surge Day down at the state capitol. We do this every year. We gather down there, and we have an area there in one of the lobbies, and we have some speakers come in, and we talk to each other, and then we try to meet with legislators, talk about upcoming legislation, talk about convention of states. So it's a day to talk about convention of states. So our Surge Day was February 19th, and I'm going to start this off here. If you recall, our state director, Dale Tipton, was the master of ceremonies, and he asked you and I to come up and talk about the excitement that we were generating about potential views for February, that we were talking about looking like February was going to be a record month in views for COS today. So he asked one of us to come up, and of course you talked me into it real quickly. So I was the one that had to go up and make some comments. So I thought
I just pointed. That's all.
Yeah, you did. Of course, you were busy. You were busy telecasting. So, by the way, that whole thing was we did broadcast that on our YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, that was a first for us. We were able to.
That was a first, and it went very well. I saw the recording.
Yeah.
So that is on our YouTube channel, American Patriots for Convention of States, in case anyone wants to watch it. So anyway, here's my comments where Dale asked us to come up and briefly talk about what was happening with us in February here. Morning, everyone. My name is Dale Parrish. I'm the host for COS today, along with my co-host Ken Kashuba. Yes, we've had. Try to make a long story very short here. We started this about 5 years ago, called it COS Indiana Live, focused primarily on what was happening with Convention of States here in Indiana. So, over the years, we started to branch out, and in 2024, we decided that we were going to change the name to COS Today, and we were going to address various issues nationally as well as statewide, but from the COS perspective, from the Convention of States perspective, namely the three pillars of our resolution and our core values as an organization. So in 2024, we latched on to the January 6th defendants and the situation going on with everything that happened on January 6th. That fell right into the government overreach category. And so we lined up some interviews with a couple J6 prisoners, as well as some individuals from various network groups that were supportive of the J6 defendants. So in November of 2024, we track our views. Every month we track how many views, how many people have viewed our program. And in November of 2024, we hit a record of 500,000 views for the month of November. We were, I never dreamed that we could ever get to that stage. And I'll tell you, I'm going to digress just a little bit here. Prior to that, the highest month in views that we ever had was 450, and it was an interview I did with Dan Stock when he returned from January 6th and told us about his experience. I think, well, Larry, you were there too, Larry Hudson, as well as another individual from Convention of States. So they attended January 6th, gave us their impressions of what went on. So we got views of 450 that month. So that was great. Well, jump forward here, and starting in 2025, we had 500,000 was our record. So we got real bold, and we said, well, we're going to set our goal in 2025 to be 1 million views. We wanted to reach 1 million views on a given month. So we started out in January of this year. We thought we'd talk about the various Trump plans that he had announced and implemented. The 10-point plan to dismantle the administrative state, the 10-point plan to fix education, the economy, and so on and so forth. So our first program in January, we dealt with the 10-point plan to dismantle the administrative state. Point number 10 in that plan dealt with term limits. Now, sir, as you know, term limits is one of our main pillars in our resolution. So, would you believe that struck a chord? That really struck a chord with many, many viewers. So much that in February, we don't have the final number, but we're already in excess of 1 million views for the month of February. So you can't believe how it makes me feel when I'm talking to a prospective guest and I tell them about COS Live. We're going to hit 1 million views here in the month. Really? And boy, does that get a reaction. That gets a good reaction. So we're on track, guys, and I don't know what we're going to, once we get the February closed out, we'll get a final number. I think we're going to be well in excess of 1 million, quite honestly. So What is our next goal going to be? Stay tuned. I don't know what we're going to decide upon. But I want to thank you all for the support that you've given us in COS today. One of the things that I realized, and many of us have realized, that how important social media plays in what we're trying to do, getting the word out. You know, it's about growing the grassroots army. That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. And I think I certainly feel like we're having success. And I think we are just getting started. So thank you for supporting us, and welcome aboard, and stay tuned. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, there you go.
Yep.
Great day.
Well, huh?
It's a great day. I've got an idea as to how we'll shoot for our not what the goal is, but I think we're going to go ahead and invite RFK to come on and challenge you to a push-up contest. I think that's what we do.
Don't you dare do that. I don't know. I don't know what how that's going to contribute to what we're going to try and do.
Well, you're hitting the gym quite a bit, so I just figured RFK and you in the gym. Yeah, we'll get some views.
Well, let me take this opportunity to let everybody know how we ended up the month with our actual numbers. And folks, we were so correct that we were going to exceed 1 million. And let me just put it up here. We finished the month in views at 1,705,544. And that just blew the socks off of our previous record of 500,000 in November of 24. So what is our next goal going to be? I do not know. I'm certain it won't have anything to do with push-ups. So
I don't know. We might get a little support on that, Dale.
So I don't know what our next goal is going to be, but we're going to enjoy this success for right now. Briefly here, I do want to say, you know, this is something that we don't talk about very much, but this is also a new record for us, and the number of followers. 19,563, and that number has been going up every month for the past 2 or 3 months. As a matter of fact, the previous goal was just in January at 17,883. So almost 2,000 more followers, Ken.
Yeah, we need to see that number start coming up in our supporting area too. Whoops, I'm on the wrong side. Our supporters and our QR code.
Yeah.
Some of that support over there, but yes, you're right. The followers are coming up, and hopefully they're tuning in for the full program like this, because that's the goal, is to bring on information that's helping people. And I have one comment I got to throw up, Dale.
Okay.
Dave Nally says preach, so go ahead, just
preach, huh? Okay. But you know, maybe when we set a goal for views, maybe we ought to also set goals for followers, huh?
I believe so, because out of that, I think is where we get our volunteers. And it's one thing to sign the petition, but it's another thing to say, hey, you know what? This meets the rubber hits the road here, and I want to be part of it. So that's a
very important point.
We're encouraging people to volunteer and get involved.
Certainly, I think if you're clicking the following, if you want to follow, you're more serious. So we need to pay more attention to that, I think. All right. Well, while we were there on Surge Day, February 19th, I was able to line up some quick interviews with different individuals, and I thought we would play those this evening too. My first interview is with my state senator, Senator Liz Brown, a very, very great supporter. But let's just go ahead and listen to that real quick. Everyone to our Surge Day here, Convention of States, Indiana. My name's Dale Parrish, and I'm with my state senator, Senator Liz Brown. I've known Senator Brown for a long time, and she was the first politician I ever met with in my entire life. And it was when I just first came into Convention of States. So, Senator, and you've been a supporter of Convention of States ever since then. I remember it was a little coffee shop in Fort Wayne, Indiana that we met.
Yes, I remember that too, Willie's.
Yes, Willie's.
And you educated me.
That's right. So, Senator, thank you for taking some time to speak to us today. Tell me, what is, I know you've got some different pieces of legislation that you're working on here. Is there one or two that really are the main ones that you're focusing on?
Well, yes, actually. One of your members had earlier mentioned the parental rights bill, which is really important. And I introduced it last year. It didn't get a hearing. We made some changes, and I think it moved through the Senate, and I think it'll move through the House easily. So that's good, sort of right-sizing parents' roles in their children's lives. I mean, what an interesting concept, right? But then another one is, in the last couple years, I've been becoming increasingly interested and concerned about consumer data privacy, cybersecurity issues, now AI, and so I have a bill this year that is going to make sure any governmental institution, whether it's your city or your schools, that they have best practices in the cybersecurity space, because they have a lot of information about citizens, and we want to make sure that they're have the best practices and policies in place to protect that.
Okay,
so
good.
That will be on third reading today in the Senate. I don't think there'll be any opposition, and then that'll go to the House too.
Okay. Well, Senator, I know you're very big into right to life.
Yes.
And I know, is there any legislation regarding that? Any further, anything going on in that?
You know, I will say there were a few bills introduced, maybe some in the House. I have a huge concern about how many other states are allowing the abortion pill to be prescribed. It can be deadly, frankly, if a woman who is pregnant is not monitored. I'm not saying I want anyone to ever use it. And there have been, I believe, 22 deaths reported to the FDA. And I was hoping we could have some more legislation on that. I'm sure you've heard of the doctor in New York who sent abortion pills to a mom in Louisiana who was going to give them to her daughter secretly. And that doctor was going to be charged in Louisiana for violating their laws, and I was hoping we could pass legislation like that here. Those bills didn't get a hearing, but I know that Governor Braun and his staff are going to be very helpful in the pro-life space. So, you know, maybe next year will be time, see how the other states have done this and play it out. That's my biggest concern, but I'm still glad that Indiana is a leader in the pro-life laws that we passed. But we did step right out there. We did. We were bold, and I'm glad we did. It wasn't easy, but I'll tell you what, you cannot give up the fight, because the other side is always looking for an opportunity to take a baby's life, which is just sad. That's right.
Well, Senator, thank you very much for your time, and once again, thank you for your continued support for Convention of States.
Well, it's thanks to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
I always enjoy talking to Senator Brown whenever I get a chance.
A long time.
So, yep, she was the first politician, legislator that I ever spoke with. I was so nervous at that time.
You mentioned how many sweat bullets you sweat that day. That's for sure.
Yes. Well, we also caught up with one of our own people that's who is heading up the CCLA an organization here in Indiana, and that's Dr. Dan Stock. And so let's listen to my interview with him. Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, COS Today. I'm here today at Surge Day at the Indiana State Capitol for COS Indiana. And I have with me here today Mr. Dan Stock. I should say Dr. Dan Stock, shouldn't I? That's the appropriate way to address him. And Dan, you're with the CCLA. So tell us a little bit about the CCLA, and let's just go from there.
So the Citizens Coalition for Legislature Accountability is a group of groups that wants to support our legislators to change the rules of the chambers so that they'll be more accountable to us than they are to the lobbyists who continually threaten them with campaign cash.
And they're very open to doing that, right?
Well, this is
I'm kidding.
Yeah, people need to understand legislators have been forced to jump through hoops and play a game that they can't possibly win for a long period of time. And they right now, that's the way the game is to them. They have a hard time seeing anything else. Also, it's very, very frightening to a legislator to stand up and say, hey, I want to change those rules, because that's going to immediately make them the lightning rod for lobbyists and campaign cash who are going to primary them and try and remove them from office.
Okay.
So what we need to have is a coalition that continually gets bigger, like we're trying to do with the CCLA, to let our legislators know, first of all, as a citizenry, we've decided to pay attention to what goes on and how a legislature works, and how those rules have made them subject to the influence of lobbyists that's outsized compared to the rest of us.
And it's these rules that prevent pieces of legislation to come up, right?
So a lot of good legislation gets filed every year, but it never gets a hearing, dies on the floor, and therefore nobody ever has to vote on it. So as a constituent, you and I can't say whether our legislator really supported that thing we wanted or not. We can't really tell.
Okay.
And it's changing these rules to make it so that everybody in every chamber is responsible if a bill dies and can be held responsible for that. That makes it so that these guys don't get divided. You have to understand right now, because if you file a bill, and if you were to bring that to the floor, if that were let to come out there and we all had to vote on that, then all of a sudden the legislature would be able to tell both the lobbyists and his constituents how he saw it. If the lobbyist was going to take them to task for that, man, the guy who proposed that and seconded that bill, those guys are going to get primary challenged and hurt. But if instead the rules are changed so that, look, everybody is responsible when a bill dies, everybody is responsible when a bill passes, then they have to actually assault over half of the chamber to actually exert their will in there anymore.
Okay.
And they can't divide up the legislature and take them off one at a time, or I should say more accurately, threaten them one at a time. They actually have to threaten the entire chamber, and now that chamber sees, hey, the people of Indiana have actually learned how this legislature works. They have told me we're going to have your back instead of going for their flanks. Then the legislature can get together and say, hey, we are going to change these rules because it protects all of us and our constituents at the same time from the influence of campaign cash. And so that's why we're trying to get together this coalition of groups to tell our legislators we are an informed electorate now, we understand how the rules work, we want them changed so that it works better for all of us. The only loser in this is the guy who has campaign cash to throw.
Okay. Now, Dan, you've got a website, right? You want to tell everybody how they can get on their website, your website?
FixMyLegislature.com. That's legislature.com. You can actually register there and send us your email, and when we do text and email blast, we can actually send you text to use with your legislator to tell them, hey, we need these rules changed, and here's why we need it, and I support you if you do these changes.
Now, you wanted me to ask you about the executive branch here in Indiana. Is the governor behind you on this?
Well, just before the election, the governor publicly stated that after the election, he was going to take a position and research the CCLA initiative.
Okay.
To date, he has not done so. The Lieutenant Governor, Micah Beckwith, is actually one of the biggest supporters of the CCLA. He's not only on record, but he's on our website supporting the CCLA initiative. But Governor Braun, to date, has actually not taken a position on this. And the next thing we're actually going to be doing with our next email and text blast campaign is to make sure Governor Braun is aware that he needs to keep that promise to us, to sit down and discuss these rules changes. That actually helps our legislature when it sees that it has support coming from the executive branch. While the executive branch can't change these rules, it actually is a very, very big thing in support of that.
So our viewers, if you want to lend a hand here, drop the governor a note to tell him to support CCLA.
That would be a very, very helpful thing.
Right. And Micah Beckwith, actually Governor Braun and Micah, our Lieutenant Governor, both are very, very strong supporters of Convention of States.
They are, and we're grateful for that.
Yes. We've had them both on COS today as guests in the past.
As a matter of fact, I think it's because of their support for the Convention of States they realize why we need a legislature that works very, very well. Exactly. Because that legislature is going to have to select rules for the commissioners that it sends.
That's right.
It's going to have to select those commissioners, and may eventually be the ones who get to decide whether or not the amendments that come out of that convention pass or not. So we need a legislature that is working very well to represent its constituency and nobody else.
Good. Well, I think that's a wrap, Dan. One more time, the website again?
FixMyLegislature.com.
All right, Dan. Dan, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on, Dale.
Thank you.
Really important area.
Yeah. Dan's real. He's it's so very important. It's so true that due to the rules, important legislation doesn't get dealt with, and so it's all part of transparency, I think. So,
I think the other important part of that too is it doesn't allow your legislator to hide. In other words,
right.
He's voting for it or against it. We should know about it.
You should know about that. That's right. Okay, one more interview that we did that day, and this is with our regional director, Catherine Zamanek, and Paul Phillips, legislative associate. So let's take a look at that one. I'm here on Surge Day here at the state capitol in Indiana, and I have with me today two very, very important people in Convention of States. First of all, Catherine Zamanek, who is our regional director, and Mr. Paul Phillips, who I have known for a long time. Paul started with Convention of States here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, as a matter of fact. And Paul is now a legislative associate with Convention of States. So thank you to both for coming to Surge Day here in Indiana. Catherine, you as regional director, I'm sure you get around to many Surge Days, don't you?
I try to. Some of the surges haven't happened yet this year, so we're waiting on timing. For example, Wisconsin's going to have a surge day. I hope to get up there. The Minnesota team did 3 different surge days, so it was a little...
Really?
They did 3 days of lobbying, so they did it a little bit differently. Iowa is tougher because they do not have offices, so the team just simply took the surge materials, asked to have it passed out to their desk on the floor, and that's how they did Surge Day this year. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, I try and get to as many Surge Days in the flyover region as I can.
Okay. Tell our viewers now, just for those that may not know, what is the purpose of the Surge Day?
Sure. So the Surge Day really is kind of twofold. It's an opportunity for our grassroots to come to the Capitol and really figure out what goes on here. So they get to visit the Capitol, they get to know the Capitol, and then we encourage them to set up appointments with their legislators to also sit in on the Senate session or the House session if it's going on, so they can see how their government works. And they hopefully will get that opportunity to talk to their own legislators about Convention of States and what they care about.
Okay. Paul, now you're a legislative associate, and do you get around to different Surge Days from time to time?
Not really, just here in Indiana because it's local for me.
Okay. So, Paul, tell us about Convention of States from a legislative standpoint. Are we looking at finding various bills across the country, across various legislatures to support?
Oh, certainly. So I'm in the legislative department. I work with Rita Peters, our Senior Vice President for Legislative Affairs. And Rita is our legislative strategist. She's tracking every state that we're active in, and in some states working with lobbyists that we hire to advance our legislation. And the legislation we work on is, of course, our application for the Article 5 convention. But we also are now introducing what we call 34 ready legislation,
Okay.
which is...
Did you originate that legislation, Paul? Be honest now.
I think you came
No.
up with the name, didn't you?
Okay, I'll take credit for the name.
Because I remember you.
I facilitated a team that came up with our model legislation.
All right.
So myself and some representatives from other states looked at all of the enacted legislation across the country that dealt with selecting and instructing commissioners to the convention oversight. And we kind of pulled what we thought was the best of the best, kind of made a Frankenstein bill out of it, and then passed that along to our legal staff, people like Mike Ferris and Rita, Mark Meckler, Will Kelly, Rob Nadelson, and those legal minds then crafted it into the bill that it is today, that we've got introduced in many, many states. This legislative session, we're getting a lot of traction with that. And that legislation is very important because it answers many of the questions of the opposition. And they claim, oh, we have no rules. We don't know how we're going to select people. We don't know what their qualifications are. That legislation answers all of those questions.
Super.
So it's, in fact, a piece of legislation that we are leading with in states where our application hasn't gotten much traction. So our idea is get that in place first, and then it would be easier to pass our legislation.
Okay.
And then the final piece of legislation that we work on we call F3, and F3 stands for Freedom, Federalism, and Fundamental Rights. And it's largely in a program in our states that have already passed. And we're trying to keep our grassroots active in working with their legislators and supporting legislation that is in the areas of freedom, federalism, and fundamental rights.
Okay.
And if we may add, we've got active legislation here in Indiana for the parental rights bill, which goes under the F3 legislation that we've been helping with.
Right.
Okay. And we just talked to Senator Liz Brown. I know she's very active in that.
She's the Senate sponsor of that bill. Yes.
Well, we're at 19 states, right?
Correct.
That have signed passed the resolution. What's your prediction? How are we going to turn out in 2025?
Do you want to take that?
We have, right now, in our region, which is the flyover region,
Right.
we have filed in Minnesota, Ohio, Iowa, Idaho, and then, of course, in Indiana, we've got the 34 ready, which is Senate Bill 450. And my prediction is we will get 4 states this year.
4 states this year?
That's my prediction.
Yeah, that's doable. So we passed out of committees in Iowa
And Idaho.
and Idaho. In Wyoming, we passed the Senate, so we have to flip to the House side. South Dakota was one we were hopeful for, got through the Senate, and were defeated in the House, which simply means we're back again next year and paying attention to those who voted against us. So it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
And so we keep pushing.
Well, 4 more states, that would be great, wouldn't it? That would be great if we could accomplish that this year.
Kansas is another potential for us. We're dealing with some other legal issues, with some language in their state constitution, which puts a higher bar on that legislative body passing our application, which is unconstitutional. So we're in litigation there, plus our application's been introduced and moving forward.
We're in, at some point or another, we're in every state, right?
We have filed in all 50 states now, historically. So
Yeah, Connecticut we filed a couple weeks ago, and that was our 50th state to have our application filed.
And for those that may not know, this is a hard process to get through. Committees, floor votes, so forth. It's a hard, and it can easily get derailed along the way. So,
and I would say the key is to get leadership on board and to have great sponsors who are true champions. We're blessed here in Indiana to have Senator Holdman, who is a true Convention of States champion, And if we had a Senator Holdman, I think, in every state,
And
we'd
we'd be
make our
done.
job easy.
We've certainly been blessed here in Indiana. There's no doubt about that. Yes, Indiana was the 6th state to pass the resolution, by the way. So
February 29th.
was it? It was. It was. Was it?
2016.
Yes.
2016. I had just come on board at that point in time. So, well, anyway, Paul, Catherine, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for coming here to Surge Day in COS, Indiana.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you do, Dale.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
you.
Ken, do you, as our viewers have seen, I'm holding a little microphone in my hand there. Do you have a regular mic that we can use?
Oh yeah, yeah. But this was obviously, the situation we're in there.
Yeah.
I've got lapel Bluetooth mics that would keep you from losing your wrists. As I noticed a number of times, you were holding up your arm. I know it's not very big and it's not very heavy, but it was.
Anyway, just it's good sound. Good quality. I think.
No, especially in that environment there, you've got, you're in the State House, so you got a lot of noise going on. You got a lot of echoing and reverb and yeah. But I think it came out fine. I think the interviews went well, Dale. Yep.
Good. Okay, well, let's watch a little bit here that National puts out. I think they put these out just about weekly, and this is the number 7 so far this year. But it kind of gives us a summary of what's going on nationally with Convention of States. So let's take a look at this.
Episode of COS Now. Before Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, there was Dr. Tom Coburn. A new Epoch Times article highlights how this conservative icon paved the way for today's fight against big government. Plus, another legislative win. Kansas advances our resolution, and Wyoming is now leading the charge to become state number 20 in the COS movement. We'll break down the latest updates from all across the country here on COS Now.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Welcome to another episode of COS Now. I'm your host, Rachel Martin, and on this show we break down all the latest news in the Convention of States movement. You guys know what to do. Make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss any upcoming content that we have for you guys. With that, let's get into today's news. For our first topic, we wanted to highlight Dr. Tom Coburn, who was a proud supporter of Convention of States action. The late family physician, U.S. Senator, and senior advisor for Convention of States was lauded in a recent piece for the Epoch Times. The article chronicles how Coburn paved the way for Doge's campaign to audit USAID. Despite battling serious cancer for years, Dr. Coburn traveled the nation to push the COS movement forward until his tragic passing in March 2020.
So you can sit back and not be involved in this process, but when you finish at the end of the day and you finish your term and you're home, and the country is $1 trillion worth off or $6 trillion worse off every year, and you didn't do something about it, it's you that didn't do something about it. It's not Washington. They're never going to do something about it. But our founders intended for you to have the absolute power to hold them accountable. And it's time. I want to tell you, they need to be held accountable. I've been there. I've seen it. It stinks. It's about them. It's not about us. And it's time to change that. And you are the ones that can change that.
We are very grateful for his time and commitment for this organization, and we would be nowhere without individuals like him. Another win for Convention of States. On Thursday, the Kansas Senate Committee on Federal and State Affairs advanced the COS resolution on a voice vote. Here's Kansas State Senator Bill Clifford on why he voted yes.
I was always opposed in the past to Convention of States, and so I'm a convert to this. And the reason I am is because when I ran for Congress and spent a lot of time in Washington on the political side rather than being there as a physician, I realized that it's broken. They're not going to fix themselves. We citizens have a chance every 2 years to fix it, and we choose not to. Although we're getting closer with the last election. And I want to be revolutionary in my lifetime, just like the founders. And so it's a privilege to support Convention of States.
The resolution now goes to the full Senate for debate. A lot has happened legislatively over the first 8 weeks of this year, so let's do a quick recap. But first, just a reminder about what this is all about. Article 5 of the Constitution says that when 2/3 of the states agree on certain topics for proposing amendments, a convention will be called. Our resolution says that commissioners could propose solutions on 3 topics: fiscal restraints on the federal government, limits on the size of the federal government, and term limits on Congress and federal officials. 19 states have already passed that resolution, so we are over halfway to the constitutional threshold of 34. The 2025 legislative sessions have kicked off to a hot start. This was the first time that Connecticut was considering the COS movement, making it the 50th state to introduce our resolution. So congrats to the Connecticut team on their years of persistence. We have scored committee victories in several states, including committees of the Kansas Senate, the New Hampshire House, a subcommittee of the Iowa Senate, and legislative committees in both the House and Senate in South Dakota. In addition to the hearings held in all those states, there was also a public hearing in Montana where local COS volunteers packed the House to make their voices heard. The COS resolution flew through the Senate with a 23-9 victory and through a House committed with an 8-5 vote. However, the South Dakota House of Representatives rejected the resolution by a vote of 29-38. The COS South Dakota team should be praised for their tireless efforts, and we look forward to them achieving final victory in the next year's session. Despite this setback, Wyoming is in the driver's seat to become state number 20 in our movement. The other chamber victory this year came in the Wyoming Senate with an overwhelming 22-7 victory. We are now awaiting action from the Wyoming House. Hearings are expected this week in Iowa and Idaho, so stay tuned by bookmarking conventionofstates.com/COS Live. Thanks for tuning into this week's recap. Be sure to check us out on other social media platforms, comment your thoughts down below, and I'll see you same time next week on COS Now.
Now, Rachel's an intern. She does a great job.
Yeah. So that's a quick. I like us to play that type of thing every week. Kind of gives us a summary of what's happening with COS nationally. So thought that was very good. Okay, well, Ken, let's talk about what's coming up next. Coming up on March 10th, one of our contributors, Brett Sturley, is going to educate us about tariffs. So that's certainly been in the news and continues to be in the news. Obviously, a great impact economically. So Brett is going to educate us on tariffs. And of course, we'll have another Dave's Daily Dose and some COS basics and some of our other things too. I might mention that Paul Phillips talked about in my interview with him and Catherine. Paul talked about F3 and 34 ready. We got some. I'm going to do some more on those two issues, and I think I've got that slated for March 10th. So we'll be talking about those a little bit more. Just thought I might mention that to everyone. Of course, our roundtable is coming up on March 24th. Every fourth Monday, we do the roundtable. Haven't got a topic yet, but I'll just tell everybody. I don't know if John Ackerman leads this for us. And of course, John is a past minister, as well as a university professor. And I've put an idea in John's mind. I don't know if he's going to latch onto it or not, but you've heard talk about with the Trump administration about bringing religion back to the country and bringing faith back. And I thought, well, that just might be right up John's alley. So I don't know if we let John pick the topic for the roundtable. So I don't know if he'll go with that, but I just thought I'd mention that. I thought that was kind of interesting to know, everybody. So, okay. All right. Always, if anyone's got any comments or questions after the broadcast is over, feel free to drop us an email. raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. All right. Well, let's start closing out here, Ken. And I want to start with another episode of COS Basics, and these are of course done by John Ackerman, the gentleman we were just talking about here. So, Ken, do we have any other comments or questions from viewers tonight that we need to address before we get into that?
Oh, other than accolades for your interview prowess there, and certainly giving you thumbs up on the job you did there.
Oh, okay.
Just a lot of complimentary comments tonight. I'm sure you can read them afterwards.
Okay. So did I? How many accolades did I get about my interviews?
Well, let me go ahead and throw one up so you can see.
Too numerous to.
David says, "Great job, Dale. Reminiscent of Charlie Rose."
Oh, is that right? Okay.
You're
David, the check's in the mail to you, so don't worry. All right, COS Basics, John Ackerman. Let's get to John here.
John Ackerman for Convention of States, Indiana. This is number 5 in our series on COS Basics. We've been talking about our core values because values determine an organization's culture. I've already spoken about the first 4 core values of Convention of States: preserve constitutional originalism, foster responsible self-governance, cultivate servant leaders, and be kind. And here is number 5. Produce meaningful results. Here in Convention of States, we do not believe in being busy just for the sake of busyness. I remember when I was a young person, when John Glenn was the first American to orbit the Earth. He went around 3 times. I remember that vividly. And I also remember the press conference he gave afterwards. Some enterprising reporter asked astronaut John Glenn what good was done by 3 orbits around the Earth. And his response burned itself into my memory. He responded by saying, "What good is a baby?" Let that sink in. What good is a baby? Well, it's full of potential. And if the conditions are right, that child will grow up and become an adult, and then there will be a lot of good. And John Glenn's 3 orbits of the Earth back in the early 1960s were probably not good in themselves, and that flight not so good in itself, but it led to Neil Armstrong being the first human being to set foot upon the moon. We believe in
Well, the audio didn't match up, or John didn't match up to the audio on. I don't know what was wrong with that.
He got a little hung up there. Yeah, that happened there in video for sure. Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty interesting comment that John Glenn made at that time. That was a lot of potential. It's led to a lot of things in our society these days.
That's
no doubt about it. Well, Kim, that pretty much wraps us up for this evening and this episode of COS Today. So, any comments that you wanted to make tonight?
No, not really. I think it was a very interesting program tonight. A mix of things that I think people hopefully enjoyed. So I think it went well, and I hope everybody enjoyed that. Other than to just go ahead and plug our support and becoming a volunteer, and look forward to coming up with new goals and meeting them as well. So
Yes, and I want to thank everyone for viewing, and thank you for contributing to our surpassing our view goal. And we'll be announcing on our next broadcast on March 10th. We'll tell you what our new goal is, because we got a meeting coming up this week, and we'll decide on what our new goal is going to be. So again, thank you everyone for your support of COS today. We're trying to bring a meaningful program to you from the COS perspective, and there's so much going on in our country today. It's hard keeping up with everything, isn't it, Ken? There's so many. It's happening so fast.
Yeah, well, that's why it's also difficult to come up with a roundtable topic, because by the time we get to the end of the month, we've got 3 new topics to discuss.
Right. Okay, well, let's bring Maringo Mike on to close us out here, and that'll be it for Ken and I. So have a good evening, everyone.
Good night.
Maringo Mike here with a reminder that our work to raise the bar on making our federal government accountable to the people is only halfway done. We need to grow our grassroots army of citizens every day to fulfill the vision of our forefathers and keep our land free and prosperous. So, if you have never signed the petition to show your support, use that QR code and do that now. While you're there, why not kick it up a notch and volunteer for many of the positions available where your talents can make a difference as we march into a new year. Thank you, and God bless.